Prison life can be tough. For some convicts, the thought of staying locked up for decades is too much to bear.
That's what I did. I escaped.
Here are some of the most creative, dangerous, and ridiculous prison escapes ever carried out.
The largest prison break of the Second World War had begun.
Number 1, the Texas 7.
Someone was trying to kill Albert Hawkins, weren't they?
I take responsibility, sir.
December 2007, prisoners escaped the John B. Connolly unit near Kennedy, Texas. The men had been locked up for a variety of terrible crimes, including sexual assault, child abuse, and murder. With many of the men facing the death penalty or life behind bars, they broke out and went on the run. The ringleader George Rivas and 6 other convicts used a selection of well-planned ploys to break out of prison. At about 11:20 in the morning, the 7 men managed to overpower and restrain 9 civilian maintenance supervisors, 4 correctional officers, and 3 other inmates.
There's no turning back.
They began their attack on the staff by knocking them out unconscious with a blow to the back of the head, removing their clothes and leaving them tied up in an electrical cupboard. They continued this tactic till they had enough fake clothing and identity cards to carry out their plan. The Texas 7 then impersonated staff on the phone to create false stories that would allow them to trick guards more easily. 3 of the 7 then approached the back of the prison disguised in civilian clothing. They told the staff they were there to install video monitors before subduing a guard and stealing weapons from a guard tower. 4 other men had stayed behind to distract guards with phone calls before stealing a pickup truck. They then simply had to pick up the rest of their gang and drive out of the prison.
I open the gate for them. He pulls ahead.
A nationwide manhunt was launched to track down the Texas 7, which became even more intense after the men robbed a Radio Shack and a sporting goods store not long after escaping.
We're coming after you, and we're coming after you until we catch you.
The men had now stolen over 40 guns and $70,000. During the robberies, police officer Aubrey White Hawkins was shot 11 times and ran over by the convicts as they fled the scene. 6 of the 7 men were captured in January 2001, the one committing suicide during a standoff with police.
Tonight, a cop killer is scheduled to die.
Joseph Garcia is a member of the murderous Texas 7.
Since their recapture, 4 of the men have been executed, with 2 more still on Texas death row.
What you call the death penalty, I call freedom. I can finally be free.
Number 2, the Cowra Breakout. You may have heard of the Great Escape, but it wasn't the only mass POW escape that took place during the Second World War, and it certainly wasn't the most violent. The Cowra Breakout wins that prize. In 1944, 359 Japanese prisoners of war escaped a prisoner of war camp near Cowra, New South Wales, Australia.
The first Japanese prisoners of war arrived at the camp in January 1943.
The prisoners viewed their capture as dishonorable, planned to riot and escape as a desperate attempt to redeem themselves. The prisoners' strategy was simple: create total chaos. At around 2 a.m. on August 5, 1944, hundreds of inmates charged the camp's gates. Despite warning shots from guards, waves of Japanese POWs continued to charge at them armed with baseball bats, nailed clubs, and other improvised weapons. More prisoners began to set fire to most of the buildings in the compound as guards attempted to man machine guns fire at the convicts. However, with the help of blankets, the Japanese prisoners managed to climb over wire fences and overpower the guards. In total, 359 POWs escaped, and 235 people died. Some prisoners committed suicide after failing to escape or to avoid recapture. Despite the huge number of escapees, all were recaptured and imprisoned within 10 days.
As a result, the Japanese government created a new cemetery at Cowra, where the remains of all Japanese who died in Australia during World War II are now interred.
Number 3. Escape from Alcatraz.
For 55 years, a mystery has lingered. Did 3 inmates actually escape and survive?
Known as one of the most famous breakouts of all time, the Alcatraz Escape went down in history as one of the most daring and creative ever. It is also shrouded in mystery as the men who had escaped were never found.
It was a legendary escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable.
Alcatraz was designed to be totally escape-proof. Located on an island off the coast of San Francisco, it housed some of the most dangerous criminals from across the U.S. and was seemingly impossible to escape from.
It's a prison where every inmate learns one thing: there is no way out.
However, despite its reputation, 3 men managed to escape in June 1962. For 6 months, the men had been widening ventilation ducts beneath their sinks, using discarded saw blades and other improvised tools.
They were able to, for several months, hide everything they were doing, including making a little workshop on top of the 3rd tier of the cell house, and manufacturing a raft and life vests and tools and paddles and stuff that they needed to escape.
In the dead of night, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin tucked paper mache heads to their beds that were designed to look like themselves, fooling the guards into thinking they were still asleep.
They crawled out of their cells up on the roof and escaped into the San Francisco Bay, and that, you got to give it to them. They broke the system.
They then made it to the roof through a series of unguarded corridors and ventilation shafts before descending 50 feet to the ground down a kitchen vent pipe. Next, they scaled 2 12-foot barbed wire fences before inflating a makeshift rubber raft and sailing off the island. None of the escapees were ever seen again.
Now a handwritten letter is again raising questions about whether the men survived the frigid waters and deadly currents of San Francisco Bay.
It is unknown as to whether they made it across to freedom or drowned off San Francisco Bay. Number 4, the Maze Prison Escape.
It was the most audacious escape since Colditz.
The Troubles were a conflict in Northern Ireland that lasted for about 30 years before coming to an end in 1998. Irish nationalists clashed with the British military for decades, many Irish fighters being killed or locked up during the fighting. The biggest prison escape in UK history occurred during this time when 38 members of the Irish Republican Army broke out of Maze Prison in 1983, a prison that was specifically used to house paramilitary prisoners.
The Maze was reputedly Europe's most secure jail, a prison within an army camp.
Inmates had been planning an escape for months, smuggling weapons into the prison in preparation. Finally, in September 1983, several prisoners turned on the guards, taking several hostages and assaulting several more. A dozen prisoners stole the guards' uniforms and car keys before assaulting a delivery truck and taking the occupants hostage. The inmates then drove the truck towards the main gate before piling out in guards' uniforms and taking even more hostages. Things soon got out of control. Officer James Ferris was stabbed in the chest 3 times after he attempted to raise the alarm. He later died. Another officer controlling the pedestrian gate was also stabbed minutes later. The prisoners soon opened the main gate. After seeing that officers had blocked it with their cars, the escapees ran out on foot. Chaos ensued as dozens of prisoners ran out of the main gate. Several were shot or captured, but 38 made it out, fleeing across fields or driving away in hijacked vehicles. Most of the escapees were eventually rounded up, although 2 men were never found. Number 5, the real Great Escape.
Many tried to escape, but less than 1% made it home.
During the Second World War, Allied soldiers being held at the Stalag Luft III prisoner of war camp carried out one of the most daring and sophisticated escapes in history. The camp was well guarded, equipped with armed guards, watchtowers, and barbed wire fences. Led by British aviator Roger Bushell, 600 prisoners planned to dig 3 tunnels called Tom, Dick, and Harry to use to escape the camp. The men used milk tin cans as shovels, ensuring each tunnel was 30 feet below the surface to avoid underground microphones placed by the Nazis. In order to avoid collapse, the men used pieces of wood scavenged from their beds. They also used homemade pumps to push fresh air down the tunnels, as well as an underground trolley system and homemade candles. After one tunnel was discovered and another deemed unsuitable, the men used Tunnel Harry to escape. On the 24th of March 1944, the escape began. Despite numerous delays and a small tunnel collapse, 76 prisoners made it out. Unfortunately, 73 were recaptured in the following weeks, 50 of which were ordered to be executed by Hitler himself to set an example. Number 6, the Battle of Al-Hasakah. The war in Syria has devastated the country for over a decade. Numerous battles and attacks have caused incalculable pain and heartache to the Syrian people, with the sheer number of incidences being overwhelming. It is because of this reason that the Battle of Al-Hasakah has remained a relatively small talking point when discussing the tragic violence. In 2022, Islamic State launched a deadly attack on the Al-Sina's prison in the city of Al-Hasakah. the prison was known for housing ICE members, including several senior leaders. In a desperate attempt to free them, hundreds of radicals targeted the prison.
This is the moment ISIL detainees escaped from prison in northern Syria. For 4 days, ISIL fighters have attempted to free their fellow members. It's unclear how many have managed to escape. How many have been killed or recaptured by Kurdish forces.
External attackers were joined by imprisoned ICE members, turning on staff and causing a full-scale battle to ensue. Suicide attackers detonated bomb vests, while others took hostages and opened fire on guards.
The ongoing battle over an attempted prison break by ISIS militants in northeast Syria, the fighting now spreading from the prison to neighboring houses.
Over 100 soldiers and guards were killed in the attack, as well as hundreds of ICE fighters. Despite their losses, 400 prisoners were able to escape during the breakout, including several high-ranking leaders. Number 7. Yoshi Shiratori. Forced to confess to crimes he didn't commit, Japanese anti-hero Yoshi Shiratori began his life behind bars in 1936. Angry at the injustice he had faced, Shiratori decided that he wasn't going to remain in prison. During his life, he escaped from Japanese prisons a total of 4 times. His first escape was achieved by picking his call lock with a metal wire before climbing out of a cracked skylight. He was recaptured after 3 days, only to escape once more after loosening the window bars each night before finally breaking them off and escaping across the roof. Shiratori tried to get help from an old guard after this escape, claiming to be innocent of any crimes. However, the guard turned him into authorities and he found himself in prison once more. His third and most famous escape occurred in 1943. During his time in his new prison, Shiratori would drip miso soup on his handcuffs and his door's food slot each day. Eventually, they became corroded, allowing him to break out. In 1944, he dislocated his shoulders and slipped out of the slot to freedom. After living in an abandoned mine for 2 years, Shiratori was captured once more after stabbing a father to death in an act he claimed was self-defense. By now, Shiratori was infamous and received the death penalty for his crimes. In 1947, he tunneled his way out of prison with a soup bowl, escaping for the 4th and final time. Years later, he had his death sentence overturned after turning himself in. He served the rest of his time before his release and death at the age of 71. Number 8. Richard Lee McNair. Convicted murderer and escape expert Richard McNair has managed to escape U.S. prisons 3 times, becoming known for his creative escape methods. After shooting 2 men in a botched 1987 robbery, killing 1, McNair was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. His first escape was performed by using lip balm to squeeze out of a pair of handcuffs and dash out of the police station where he was being held. He was chased through town before jumping off a 3-story building to lose the cops. He injured himself after colliding with a tree and was sent back to jail. His second escape came in 1992 when McNair and 2 other prisoners crawled through a ventilation shaft to freedom. After breaking out, he grew his hair and dyed it blonde before drifting around the country in stolen cars for a while. After 10 months, he was caught and sent back to prison. McNair's third and final escape was achieved by hiding in a specially constructed escape pod, which was buried under a pile of mail bags. He had an air tube to allow him to breathe, hiding within a shrink-wrapped pallet. After the mail was moved to an unsecure area, McNair cut himself out and walked to freedom. He was later stopped by a police officer running through Belle, Louisiana.
What is? We got an escapee. Oh, where from? Prison. There's a prison here? Yeah.
McNair managed to convince the officer he wasn't the guy they were looking for and went back to jogging.
No, he's clean.
He managed to avoid recapture for some time, crossing over the border to Canada before finally being caught in 2007. He's currently serving his sentence in Colorado. Thanks for watching our list of the most infamous and creative breakouts in history. We hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe for more.